Would you favor America's foreign policy to be based on institutional, rules-based alliances, or are we better with flexible transactional America First relationships?
Fourth question you ask is, would I favor America's foreign policy to be based on institutional rules-based alliances, or are we better with flexible transactional America First relationships? The Trump administration's America First policies have been a disaster, not only for America's moral leadership in the world, for our role to play in multilateral foreign policy and diplomacy, but for the American economy, for trade agreements that have put American workers at a disadvantage. We've seen the prosecution of reckless trade wars that have hurt American consumers and workers. And we've also seen that they've yielded very little, if any, benefit for the American people. So I believe in a multilateral, multifaceted foreign policy. I believe we are strongest when we work with our allies, and I believe that the priority of the next administration should be strengthening the institutions and alliances that have maintained world peace in large part since the end of the Second World War. That includes NATO. It includes making sure that we send experts and people who believe in the institutions like the United Nations as our representatives to those bodies. It means re-upping our funding to the World Health Organization. It means pursuing a fact-based, expert-led foreign policy on all fronts.
Your question next is regarding U.S. foreign policy and international institutions. Look, I think that the U.S. should be a leader in helping build a world where there is more cooperation between nations, where international peace is achieved via diplomacy rather than through sheer intimidation or force of arms. I believe in diplomacy as one of the most essential functions of government. I'll support U.S. diplomats instead of hamstringing them. I believe that the Trump administration's efforts to purge our government of apolitical civil servants and foreign service officers and replace it with partisan hacks and loyalists has been deeply damaging to our capacity to engage in diplomacy. And I look forward to the day soon when, with new political leadership here in the United States, once again the U.S. will be admired and our leadership will ring out and help guide all of humanity toward a brighter future.
The United States Senate seat that I seek to hold was once held by stalwart statesmen such as Max Cleland, Senator Sam Nunn, and Wyche Fowler. We have a long way to go to bring back that level of diplomatic discourse, of statesmanship, and of thoughtful contemplation of the foreign affairs of this country. We have for now 3.5 years been subject to knee-jerk and ego-laden disruption of relationships long fought for. In fact, relationships built on this ultimate sacrifice of those who went to war to defeat authoritarian, totalitarian dictators, to ensure that people could have a free and better way. And so we live in a global community, and we must wrap our heads and our hearts around that, and our elected officials must begin to reinstill the State Department, to bolster it with funding, and with the policies that we need to stand by our agreements and our treaties, such as the Paris Climate Accord, such as the JCPOA, which now we must renegotiate in a way that can be certainly enforced and can be transparent, but in a way that stands by our agreements so that we can assure that there is no additional holder of nuclear weapons in this global community of ours. No, as I said before, we can't have America first in the sense of an isolationist, nationalistic credo. We are part of a global community. In fact, we are the leaders of a global community. And the Senate is the entity which ratifies treaties. The Senate is the entity which confirms those that will head the departments, such as the State Department and others that will work with global leaders around the world to ensure that we don't get into conflicts and combat unnecessarily. I intend to take back the constitutional requirement and responsibility of our legislature in the More Powers Act so that any effort to engage in a conflict around the world will be negotiated and will be voted on by those that you have placed as your representatives in the legislature. It's only right that we have extra eyes and ears and statespeople considering those important decisions.